Now we're joined again in the studio by TRT World's editor-at-large, Ahmed al-Burai. Now, let's ask the question, possibly the white elephant in the room right now. Where is America in all of this?
That's the 1 million question, I believe. Trump has isolated himself, whether he liked or not, starting by the cutting of the train and equip program for the rebel groups, depending mainly on the southern front with Jordan and depending on the Jordanian intelligence and the rebels in that place, and completely abandoning Turkey's concern and turning a blind eye to what Turkey is trying to tell them. They used to be, the United States and Turkey, very close allies, as they both are NATO members. But unfortunately, with the unclear, uncertain strategy that the United States administrations, whether the Barack Obama or the Trump administration is following, pushed Turkey away from the orbit of NATO, and it seems that Turkey is moving slowly towards other alliances in the region. Now we've seen that the recent development with the Qatar crisis has pushed Turkey and Qatar closer to Iran. They have lots of geopolitical interests in Syria, and we've seen how the Trump administration has been ostracized and doesn't have the momentum in Syria as they used to do, with keeping themselves away by the defeat of Daesh in Raqqa, which seems very imminent. The American role could not be there anymore. They've already finished Mosul with all of the collateral damage happening. Now they're away from the region, leaving a vacuum, because it was Tillerson himself who said we're not interested in the post-Daesh era, or we are not interested in construction of nations. So now it seems that the United States is busy with Trump's business inside the United States, leaving the whole region to the regional powers.
And you mentioned NATO. What do you think their reaction will be to seeing Russia, Iran and Turkey together on the same page today?
It's still their own problem. The NATO didn't take Turkey seriously. NATO is one of the most important members. Turkey is one of the most important members of NATO. And if NATO doesn't take the concerns and the worries of Turkey towards the region, Turkey, to be honest, needs the NATO to be more involved, because they believe that we are closer than the United States. Our border with Russia, with Syria, with Iraq, NATO should be involved there. But it was the NATO itself that took its own interest, that does not consider what Turkey is telling them on the ground seriously. And that's the problem with Turkey. At the end of the day, you have your own national security. What's happening in Iraq is an imminent threat to your national security. Your allies are not helping you, are not listening to your concern. The United States is doing the same thing. So it doesn't make any sense for Turkey to just sit silent, watching whatever happening there, and waking up one day finding that it has a hostile entity on its border, having another autonomous entity in Iraq with the other hostile organizations like the PKK, finding a launching pad to recruit more members who publicly state that the enemies of Turkey. So this is going to affect the national security negatively. That's why Turkey is taking these serious measures. Now, what's happening on the ground, the fluidity of the whole region doesn't make you or doesn't give you the room to say that this is the strategy for the coming few years, or Turkey is going to be an ally to Iran. Things may reshuffle over a night. All of a sudden, Turkey may change the whole operation. Now we have the Free Syrian Army. Are they the major power on the ground that can achieve this kind of operation? Will Turkey try to involve the Russians, the Iranians as well, or will they retreat based on the other movement, because the other players in the region are not silent? Assad is there, Saudi Arabia is there, Egypt is trying to take part of Turkey's role in the region. So you have many factors that can change the calculus of every party overnight.
It seems like uncharted waters almost. And tell me now, before when we were speaking, you mentioned some element of positivity, some hope that the Syrian war, this could be a game changer now, what's happening. Talk to me about that. Is it really possibly the end of the war in Syria?
I'm always optimistic, and to be honest, we have to be cautiously optimistic. This time is completely different, because what I believe in, if the regional powers are involved rather than the international community that displayed and demonstrated its inaction completely, even they were not able to save corridors to Madaya, to Homs at the time of the siege. So the people get desperate from the so-called international community. The United Nations efforts on the ground didn't prove to be valid, didn't have the credibility, so the people can believe them. Now, for many of the rebel factions on the ground, they do not trust the Iranians, and they don't want to be a supervisor on the ground. That is one of the challenges for the de-escalation zone. Many of the delegations in the Asatana just left the negotiation room because of the Iranian delegation was there and the involvement of Iran. They do consider Iran as an occupation. But on the other hand, Assad is there, and it seems that he is needed and he will stay for any transitional period.
He will stay, you think?
I think so. He will stay. It seems that the international community, mainly the United States and Russia, especially Russia, is highly interested, more than Iran. They do not want to commit the mistake of Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi in Egypt. So he will stay maybe for a transitional period, and then they will find a way to have any kind of let's say, superficial reforms that will lead to a political transition or any kind of election. So the regional powers are the main game changers. If they do have the sincerity to find a way for this ongoing violence, I think they will succeed, because everybody is fed up.
Let's stay with that. Words of hope there, that it's the regional powers and not the international community that could change the dial here. Thanks so much, Ahmed al-Burai.